Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
"This isn't your business," she said, looking over her horn-rimmed glasses like I just interrupted her manicure to talk about a lunch menu. That was the exact moment I realized I was screwed, not because I'd found something wrong, but because I'd told the truth to someone who'd already decided it didn't matter. Her name was Olivia Brandt, CEO of Halcyon Analytics, the kind of woman who smiled like she owned the sun and made sure you knew she had the power to block it out whenever she felt like it. I'd been with the company for 12 years. Started back when it was just a half dozen of us packed into a glass box in the industrial district, eating takeout and coding dashboards while trying not to trip over power cords. I stayed when they couldn't pay bonuses. I stayed when they outsourced the dev team to Bangalore. I stayed through 5 managers, 3 reorgs, and one deeply unfortunate Christmas party that involved tequila and a foam snow machine. I was the guy who made sure payroll hit when the servers went down and the guy who picked up the slack when someone's strategic initiative fell apart mid-quarter. So when I noticed the numbers weren't adding up, little things at first, like expense reports for vendors we never onboard or monthly payments to an LLC no one could identify, I didn't think conspiracy. I thought accounting error. You know, those classic finance department hiccups where someone accidentally routes $25,000 a month into a shell corporation registered in Delaware. Happens all the time, right? I brought it to Olivia in good faith, in a slim blue folder with labeled tabs and printed backups. I even practiced how to say it nicely. There seems to be some confusion in vendor classification instead of, "Hey, is someone laundering money through the internal SaaS budget?" And I wasn't even accusing her directly. For all I knew, it was a rogue exec or some dusty loophole left over from the acquisition 2 years back. But I underestimated one thing: Olivia's smile. That damn smile that said, "Thank you for your input," while quietly drawing a dotted red line through your name in her mental org chart. "This isn't your business," she repeated, flipping the folder shut with 2 fingers like she didn't want to touch it for longer than necessary. "You're not at that level. Now, here's the part where I probably should have backed off." Smiled. Nodded. Pretended I was confused and gone back to my desk to quietly update my resume like any other self-respecting middle-aged finance analyst trying not to die of hypertension in a startup cult. But instead, I said something stupid like, "It becomes my business when the company I helped build is exposed to legal risk." That's when she tilted her head, narrowed her eyes, and delivered the final blow. "Thanks for your concern, Thomas. I think we're done here." 3 days later, I was restructured, not fired. Oh no. Nothing so straightforward. Olivia didn't believe in clean breaks. She believed in HR-driven euthanasia, where they slowly turn the lights off around you until you stumble into the darkness yourself. My team got reassigned. My projects disappeared. My calendar filled up with pointless one-on-ones with junior analysts who barely knew how to calculate depreciation. They didn't even disable my email. They just stopped replying. It was like being ghosted by your own career. I tried to play it cool at first. Told my wife it was just internal shifting and that I needed to ride it out. But you can't lie to someone who's been with you since you were eating cup noodles and arguing about server hosting fees at 2 a.m. She knew something was wrong. I told her about the folder, the meeting, and the fallout. She didn't say much, just poured me a drink and muttered, "They picked the wrong guy to screw with." I still had access. That was their first mistake. They thought I'd sulk, pout, maybe rage quit and go freelance. But the second I saw the new org chart, with my name conveniently moved into special projects, I knew they were prepping the paperwork to make me the scapegoat if things went sideways. They weren't just ignoring the truth, they were building a new version of it. One where I was the incompetent one who missed the fraud. So I did what any rational, overworked, underappreciated finance guy with a grudge and a backup server would do. I opened a new spreadsheet. Not to balance the budget, not to track KPIs, but to start documenting everything they hoped I'd forget. Every payment, every approval, every timestamp. I traced the shell company back to a real name, Marcus Brandt, her husband, a name that hadn't shown up in any vendor list before Q2, a name that, if searched in Delaware's business registry, came up as owner of a consultancy firm with exactly one client, us. It wasn't just sketchy, it was stupid, amateur hour stuff. And I realized then, Olivia wasn't invincible. She was just insulated, surrounded by people too afraid to say the obvious. That's the problem with rising stars. Eventually, they forget the ground they came from is full of people who know where all the wires are buried. I didn't yell. I didn't storm into another meeting or go full whistleblower on LinkedIn. I just smiled, closed the folder, and started thinking about the most public place I could leave it. Something poetic, something impossible to ignore. Because if Olivia wanted to make this personal, I could make it very, very public. What would you do if your boss stabbed you in the back like this? Let it go, or burn the house down with receipts. I knew they were coming for me the second I saw the calendar invitation from HR titled Performance Optimization Check-in, because no one who's actually doing well gets called into a performance meeting with two business analysts and a notepad. That's the corporate version of a tap on the shoulder from a mob boss's cousin. Polite, formal, and ending with something you'll never recover from. I walked in with a mug that said, "World's okayest employee," and a smile like I'd just been handed a front row seat to my own funeral. There was Susan from HR, eyes full of overly rehearsed empathy, and then next to her was my new manager, Travis. Ah, yes, Travis with no last name. Okay, he had a last name, but he introduced himself on day one with just Travis, like a guy who spent one summer in Silicon Valley and now thought surnames were for people with dental plans. 28, ex-McKinsey, MBA from somewhere overpriced and sunny, and couldn't explain the difference between cash flow and profit without Googling it twice. And now, somehow he was my boss. The kicker? Travis had been hired 6 weeks ago, barely long enough to find the coffee machine, and suddenly he was doing a performance improvement review on the guy who wrote the damn onboarding manual. He gave me that enthusiastic lean-in move, elbows on knees, voice soft like we were sharing secrets at a campfire, and said, "We've noticed a bit of decline, Tom. In your output, in your attitude." And I nearly laughed out loud because if there's one thing corporate loves more than open floor plans, it's vague accusations that can't be disproved. They weren't even creative about it. Apparently, I had missed several key deadlines, which was wild, considering the projects they said I missed had either already been reassigned or straight up canceled. I asked for specifics, and Susan just said, "It's more about patterns than individual instances," like she'd practiced that phrase in a mirror for weeks. Patterns, right. The pattern being they wanted me gone, but not loudly, just quietly enough that no one at the shareholders' table would ask why the only guy who flagged the CEO's financial nonsense was suddenly in the unemployment line. They slid me a PIP, performance improvement plan, which might as well be a pre-written eulogy, complete with milestones and coaching sessions with Travis. My job, apparently, was now to relearn core systems I had designed myself and align with new workflows that Travis couldn't even define when I pressed him for details. I played along, took the packet, nodded like I was grateful. Then I walked out, went straight to my car, sat there in the parking garage for 20 minutes, and just stared. You ever have that moment when you realize your loyalty was just a number on someone else's org chart? Like the thing you gave years of your life to, the late nights, the skipped birthdays, the weekends spent fixing things nobody else even understood, was now being reduced to underperforming deliverables? I thought about the time I stayed up all night during a system migration to make sure payroll didn't fail. I thought about the project I salvaged when the VP went on paternity leave and forgot to submit the final budget. None of it mattered. Not anymore. They replaced my name on our financial review dashboard that afternoon. Literally swapped me out midday. I refreshed the internal site and saw it. Lead analysis by Travis Caldwell. I'd run the dashboard for 7 years. Knew every number inside and out. And now it was crashing every other hour because Travis, genius that he was, didn't understand how to adjust for fiscal quarters that didn't align to the calendar year. I didn't say a word. I just watched the thing glitch in real time, watched the reports roll in with bad data, and smiled quietly like someone watching their ex-date a clown. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you cover. Everyone thought I was spiraling, that I was bitter, confused, and ready to quit. But I wasn't quitting. I was collecting. I started archiving every email, every chat, every oops, we forgot to loop you in conversation that suddenly justified my removal from the project list. I backed up finance records to my personal drive, nothing proprietary, just the same public-facing reports anyone could access if they knew where to look and how to read between the lines. Meanwhile, Travis was walking around like he'd invented analytics. He kept setting up strategy syncs with me where he'd talk for 40 minutes and then ask me to send him a summary of what he just said. I sent him summaries, all right. Beautifully worded, slightly off, subtly passive-aggressive notes that made it clear I was listening, just not taking him seriously. He never noticed. He was too busy trying to impress Olivia, who now referred to me in meetings as legacy staff. That's executive speak for waiting for you to leave so we can delete your login. They were smart, I'll give them that. They didn't fire me. They just made the job so unbearable that leaving would feel like a relief. But that's the thing, I didn't need relief. I needed justice. And every condescending meeting, every fake performance flag, every smug smile from Travis just sharpened the blade I was quietly forging behind the scenes. They thought they were slowly pushing me out. What they didn't know was that every time they moved another project away from me, they gave me more time. And with that time, I wasn't just surviving. I was planning. Because if they thought I was done after 12 years, they clearly hadn't read the fine print on the kind of employee they were trying to bury. And when I buried people, I made sure the whole office showed up for the funeral. By the time they started calling me quiet in meetings, that soft, fake concerned way HR people say it when they've already marked you as a lost cause, I had already decided I wasn't going down with some whimpering dignity script they wrote for me. Let them think I was burned out or checked out or gently sliding into irrelevance. What I was actually doing was watching, and not just the usual spreadsheet surveillance, either. I was watching them. Watching the slips, the omissions, the awkward pivots when I walked into a room and the conversation changed by a half-beat. It's funny how people forget who designed the system once they think you've lost the keys. I started small. No dramatic hacker moments, no breaking into offices under cover of darkness. I didn't need to. They never locked me out properly, because somewhere in their smug little boardroom brains, they still thought I was too much of a has-been to matter. So I logged into the finance backend late at night, like I'd done 100 times before, only now I wasn't balancing books, I was tracing patterns. Cross-referencing vendor invoices with payment histories, watching for anything that smelled off. And it didn't take long. There it was again, Brandt and Pierce Consulting. The same vendor I'd flagged in the original folder. Still receiving regular payments, still flying under the radar, still listed under IT vendor management, even though no one in IT had ever met them. I asked around casually, dropping a line to an old buddy in procurement over coffee. He squinted at the name, then pulled out his phone and said, "We haven't onboarded anyone new in that category this year. At least not officially." That was all I needed. Digging deeper meant I had to cover my tracks, so I played the part. I started showing up early again, wearing slightly wrinkled shirts that said, "I care just enough to not get flagged by HR, but not enough to be a threat." I let Travis lead every meeting with his half-baked jargon, nodding along like a loyal minion. I even faked confusion once or twice, just to make him feel smarter. It worked like a charm. He stopped watching me. Olivia barely acknowledged me in hallway encounters. And the younger analysts? They treated me like a ghost. Ghosts, as it turns out, have a lot of freedom. I started keeping a private log, backed up twice, once on a thumb drive taped to the underside of my desk drawer and once in a cloud folder with a name boring enough to deter even the nosiest sysadmin. I logged every irregular transaction, timestamped every payment to Brandt and Pierce, and pulled internal emails that referenced them without context. I found a paper trail, subtle but undeniable, linking Olivia's executive approvals to those invoices. Most damning of all, one internal memo from the COO, dated 6 months prior, asking, "Are we clear on covering those legacy contracts with Marcus?" I didn't even need to Google it. Marcus Brandt. Her husband. It was all right there. What made it beautiful was how banal it looked to anyone not paying attention. If you didn't know what to look for, it read like a perfectly boring series of internal transactions between departments that spoke in acronyms and buzzwords. But if you did know, if you'd worked those systems for over a decade, it was like a blinking red light screaming, "Fraud lives here." And it wasn't just the money. That was bad, sure, but it was the intentionality that got me. Someone, maybe Olivia, maybe her little executive circle, had deliberately hidden the payments, buried the approvals in cross-departmental handoffs, and structured the whole thing to pass casual scrutiny. Which meant they knew. And if they knew, and they were still smiling in board meetings and pushing me out, they weren't just unethical. They were dangerous. I remember standing in the server room one night, the one they hadn't reassigned access to yet, with the hum of machines buzzing around me and a stack of printed records in my hand. It hit me how surreal the whole thing was. I was the guy who'd kept things running in the background for years, and now I was about to dismantle the entire thing from the inside. Not out of vengeance, at least not entirely, but because watching them skate away untouched was something I just couldn't stomach. Not after everything. Not after the lies, the gaslighting, the fake smiles over lukewarm coffee. So I started planning the drop. Not some clumsy email blast or desperate whistleblower hotline call. No, this had to be done right. Strategically, publicly, irrefutably. I made a list of names, board members, key investors, legal advisors, and cross-referenced their calendars against Olivia's. Found out where they'd all be during the next shareholder quarterly. Reserved a guest badge for the office the day before. Scanned the final folder to PDF. Printed a hard copy. 2 hard copies, actually. One to leave somewhere, visible. The other to send, elsewhere. And all the while, I smiled. I smiled at Travis as he butchered another report summary. I smiled at Olivia when she walked past me without a word. I smiled in the break room when someone asked if I considered early retirement. I even smiled in my final performance check-in, where HR said they were concerned about disengagement and offered me a soft landing package to walk away quietly. I took the package, smiled, signed, said thank you. Then I went home and added the final piece to the folder. Because if they wanted to erase me from the company's story, I was going to make sure the last chapter they remembered had my fingerprints all over it. The day I walked out of Halcyon for the last time, the sun was too bright for how calm I felt inside, like the world had flipped upside down, but my gut was finally steady for the first time in months. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even pack my desk with any urgency. I just sat there, calmly folding up 12 years of my life into one small cardboard box while my coworkers offered me those awkward, "we'll keep in touch," smiles they didn't really mean. That's the thing about exits. Everyone wants them to be quick, clean, and preferably silent. But mine? Mine was going to echo. I left the farewell donuts on the break room table with a note that said, "For the best team a guy could ask for," even though half of them had voted me off the island by omission. I shook Travis's hand. Yes, Travis, the child executive, and told him he was going to go far. I meant it too, if we're defining far as wherever nepotism and blind luck are still accepted as currency. And then, with everyone distracted by free sugar and soft exits, I took the folder, the one I'd printed, compiled, labeled, and proofread like it was going before a Senate hearing, and walked it down to the 22nd floor conference suite, where the quarterly investor luncheon was scheduled to begin in exactly 27 minutes. It wasn't just a stack of papers anymore. It was a weapon, wrapped in a manila folder with 3 words typed in bold across the cover: internal compliance findings. No signatures, no cover letter, no direct accusations. Just clean, surgical evidence laid out like a narrative with bank transfers, approval emails, falsified contract logs, and a recurring vendor payment to a man with the last name Brandt. All documented, all dated, all traceable. No editorializing. Just facts. That's what made it dangerous. Now, the investor suite had this massive glass table, the kind that looks like it costs more than most people's cars. I slipped in while they were still setting out sandwiches and sparkling water, placed the folder at Olivia's usual chair, second from the end, closest to the window, and walked right out without anyone saying a word. I didn't have to sneak. I didn't even badge in that time. I'd set up a guest access request the week before, tied to a fake meeting invite from external audit liaison. No one ever double-checks the boring stuff. But I wasn't done. Before leaving the building, I stopped by the executive suite one last time. The lights were dim, Olivia's team was all down in the luncheon room, and the air smelled like eucalyptus, probably from some absurdly overpriced diffuser. I slid a USB stick into the assistant's desktop and dropped a backup copy of the folder in the shared finance drive, under an old training directory labeled Q1 Compliance Videos. It would stay buried for now, but if someone ever came sniffing around, well, it'd be there. Then came the main event. See, earlier that week, I'd done some digging, not into company servers this time, but into the guest list. There was one name on the attendee roster that made me pause: Gregory Faulkner, founding partner of Faulkner Venture Capital and one of the firm's lead backers for the IPO rollout. The guy was known for 2 things: his obsession with clean governance and a pathological hatred of being made a fool in public. That made him perfect. So I printed another copy of the folder, slightly condensed but still lethal, and hand-delivered it to the concierge desk at his hotel the night before the luncheon. I wrote, "For Mr. Faulkner's review, time-sensitive," and used a crisp envelope with halcyon letterhead, one of the ones I'd taken from the supply closet during my last week. I figured the odds were decent he'd read it. I figured the odds were better he'd walk into that luncheon with questions. And if not, well, that glass table folder would still be waiting. The last thing I did before walking out of the building forever was drop my company badge into the suggestion box at reception. No note. Just the badge, face up, sitting atop a pile of anonymous complaints about the office espresso machine and bathroom paper towel dispensers. I figured that was fitting. After all, my whole career at Halcyon had been about cleaning up messes no one else wanted to touch. By the time I hit the parking garage, I could feel it, a weird kind of lightness. Like after you finally stop holding your breath. I didn't speed. I didn't look back. I just drove home with the windows cracked and the radio on, listening to some guy talk about interest rates like the world hadn't just shifted 3 degrees in my favor. The fallout didn't take long. I got a text 2 days later from a former teammate, one of the few who hadn't turned into a corporate robot. All it said was, "Luncheon ended early." Brant didn't speak. Faulkner left in the middle. "Something's happening." I didn't respond. Didn't have to. The news broke 4 days after that. Halcyon delays IPO citing internal review process and leadership transitions. That's corporate PR speak for, "We got caught with our hands in the wrong cookie jar." Olivia went on temporary sabbatical. Travis issued a 2-sentence statement about leadership challenges. The board said they were initiating an independent audit. No one mentioned me. That was fine. I didn't need credit. I didn't want applause. I just wanted them to feel what I had felt. That slow, tightening sense of panic when you realize the story you've built is falling apart in front of the very people you swore would never see the cracks. And now? Now I was free. Free to sleep through Monday mornings, free to drink coffee that didn't taste like regret, and most importantly, free to watch them squirm while pretending it was all just an unfortunate misunderstanding. But make no mistake, there was nothing accidental about what I did. I was quiet. I was precise. I was patient. And when I finally struck, I made sure it was somewhere they'd never forget. Right at the heart of their glossy, catered, silver-plattered future. You'd think the moment the news hit, the official IPO delay, the sudden personal leave of Olivia Brant, and the vague but ominous mention of a third-party financial audit, I'd be on my feet, clapping like a maniac in my living room with a bottle of champagne and a front-row seat to the collapse. But the truth is, when it finally happened, I was just still. Sitting on my back porch with a lukewarm mug of coffee, wearing the same flannel shirt I used to keep draped over my office chair, watching a squirrel absolutely destroy my bird feeder while CNBC read the headlines in monotone. It didn't feel like revenge. Not at first. It felt like stepping outside after a hurricane and realizing your house is still standing while everyone else's roof got peeled off in the night. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat. I just exhaled. For the first time in months, I didn't have a tension headache burrowed between my temples. No fake meetings. No thin smiles from HR. No Travis asking me to circle back on the KPI synergy roadmap like it meant something. Just peace. Messy, quiet, overdue peace. The press release was a masterpiece of non-apology, written by someone who got paid 6 figures to say absolutely nothing. After a recent internal compliance query raised by key stakeholders, Halcyon Analytics has elected to delay its IPO until further governance reviews are complete. Not a whisper of what the query was, or who the stakeholders were, or why Olivia had vanished from her CEO duties like a magician yanked her off stage. But people started putting it together. Analysts noticed inconsistencies. Investors asked sharper questions. And Faulkner? Faulkner started ghosting them publicly, which in the venture capital world is basically like drawing a skull and crossbones on a pitch deck. I didn't get any thank you cards, of course. That's not how these stories end. I wasn't some whistleblower hero on the cover of Fortune magazine. I was just a name that got quietly scrubbed from the company website, a face that vanished from the org chart without so much as a farewell post on LinkedIn. That's how they protect themselves, not by owning up, but by pretending the person who caught the match before it hit the fuse was never even holding it in the first place. But make no mistake, they felt it. I started hearing from people. Not directly, of course, but through the grapevine. A buddy in compliance who said the audit turned up significant irregularities they couldn't explain away. One of the assistant project managers, the kind who lives on Slack and knows every piece of office gossip before it reaches HR, told a mutual friend that Travis had been reassigned to a different division 2 states away, which is corporate speak for, "We don't want to fire you because it looks bad, but we need you far away from anything that matters." And Olivia? Gone. No press conference. No final message. Just silence. I never told anyone about the folder. Not even my wife. She knew something happened, could tell by the way I stood a little straighter, how I didn't flinch every time my phone buzzed. But I never said the words. Not out loud. She didn't need them. She just poured me a drink one night and said, "So, did you get the last word?" And I smiled, slow and tired, and said, "I didn't need to." The numbers spoke for me. After everything, I didn't jump into a new job right away. I took a few consulting offers, easy stuff, short-term projects where no one tried to backstab you over lunch. And for the first time in a decade, I started choosing my time. No more overnight fire drills. No more sacrificing weekends to fix other people's screw-ups. I even started teaching a financial ethics seminar at the community college. Nothing flashy. Just me in a room, telling kids what not to do when they get their first office job, and hoping maybe one or two of them actually listen. The best part? Halcyon never recovered the way they thought they would. The IPO stayed on ice for months. Investors pulled back. Morale tanked. And while they didn't go under, they certainly stopped pretending they were the next Salesforce. No more big talk. No more glossy promo videos with fake smiles and buzzword vomit. They became just another company, bloated, embarrassed, and bleeding talent faster than they could replace it. And me? I walk past the building sometimes. Not on purpose, just when I'm in that part of town. It's weird seeing it from the outside now, the big glass panels, the logo etched in steel, the revolving doors I used to dread stepping through every Monday. It looks the same, but it's not. It's quieter now. And when I see some new employees swipe their badge and walk inside, part of me wants to warn them. But I don't. Everyone's got to learn their own way. Sometimes I think about Olivia, wherever she ended up. Maybe she landed on her feet. People like her usually do, golden parachutes, board seats, and polite invitations to speak at leadership summits about resilience. But I like to think that, somewhere in the back of her mind, when the room goes quiet and someone brings up financial governance, she thinks of me. Thinks of the folder. Thinks of the man who smiled, closed it, and left it somewhere she'd never be able to ignore. I don't know if what I did was right in some grand moral sense. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was personal. Maybe I became the villain in someone else's story without realizing it. But here's what I do know. They tried to erase me, and I left a scar instead. One that made them bleed just enough to remember. And that, in the end, was enough.